Alright, hello and welcome back to the Roommate Humanities vlog. Today I'll be continuing and nearly finishing, but not quite finishing, my many-part piece on fantasy glossary terms. We're starting where we left off, the letter O. Now the first item on my list is Olaf, also from Frozen. I'm going to look back on this glossary later on and I'm just going to shake my head. Like whatever Disney movie has most recently come out is just going to fill my list. So I got Olaf, who's a living snow person. Fun aside, my 2-year-old son calls them snow chickens. Whenever he sees a snow person, he just goes buck, 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 which I think is great. Because, I mean, they got the little beaks, you know, so they kind of look like chickens. So, I mean, there is this thing in fantasy referred to as an elemental, and the idea is that you have a creature or a being or an entity that is comprised entirely from a single element, usually earth, water, fire, or air, but they come in other flavors as well, and I really think of Olaf as sort of a snow elemental, and they have varying degrees of sentience. Sometimes they are just a force, powerful and not necessarily intelligent, and sometimes they can speak and whatnot. And they're usually magically created. They do not tend to be protagonists. Next on my list, I have Oracle. Oracle, again, is a holdover from ancient Greece. Since prophecy and destiny are such key ideas to fantasy, characters have destinies, they have prophecies. There are riddles that dictate like what someone must do to accomplish their end. Because of this, the Oracle is always going to play a key role in fantasy. They won't always be like priestesses living in temples. Sometimes the prophecy will be a riddle or a poem or a story, but they'll always be there. It's part of fantasy. It's one of my least favorite aspects of fantasy, but it's there. Next on my list, I have Orc. Now, I think orcs are a Tolkien invention. I think. I mean, it could be Norse, because he does get a lot of stuff from Nordic storytelling. But I think he invented it. You need to distinguish between orcs and goblins, in that a goblin is a mischief maker, evil, but a mischief maker. And they're also very fey, almost, like very fairy world-ish. At the same time, the orc is, I think it's more analogous to a man, to a human being, in that they're the same size as a human being, and they're more intelligent, and they're more organized, but they're just as evil. In Tolkien, the orcs are created by Morgoth, I think his name is, when he takes elves and he takes them into his dark, dark places and he tortures them and he twists their very nature and he creates this race of evil. Finally, before I move on, orcs are very, they have a lot of kids. They reproduce very, very quickly. So there also tends to be a lot of them. They tend to be big, they tend to be muscular, and they tend to be very numerous, but they're dumb. Next up I have P. P starts with Pinocchio, the idea of taking an inanimate object and making it into a person. I guess you can call that personification, I guess. That's a poetry joke. But kind of literally, right? Like you're taking an object and you're giving it human characteristics. Pinocchio is a fun deviation from the norm in that he eventually turns into a real boy, as though something was put into the puppet that gave it real personness, which is fun. Next, I have portals. Now, I assume that my students are talking about the fantastic video game by the same name. But in fantasy, you do tend to get a lot of portals between worlds. You have other worlds quite regularly in fantasy. I think they're at their best when they don't look like portals, when they are, for example, boots or wardrobes or paintings or something like that. So gateways between worlds. And I think the great thing about having them not look like obvious doorways is that it can be very hard to get back through the doorway, seeing as the way back doesn't necessarily look how you expect it to. Next up I have pills, which I assume is Alice in Wonderland. You know, one pill will make you larger and the other will make you smaller, or something to that extent. I don't really know if there's any application in fantasy beyond that. And next I do a little bit of research on this one. Pekka? Pekka, P-E-K-K-A, is a character from a video game. But it is sort of depicted as being like a living coat of armor. So you have like armor and weaponry that have been imbued with life and can be commanded by those who can work magic. And finally, I have Queen, Queen. Now, Queen is a real right down the middle kind of lady in fantasy. They're either the very embodiment of good and they're prone to dying, or they're the very embodiment of evil. There's nothing in between for queens. But they are often magical, like almost without exception. Um, if there's magic in your world and you have a queen, people will look to her to be a master of it, a practitioner. I think it's because women in general in storytelling are often depicted as being somehow otherworldly or mystical. Read into that as much as you'd like. That's all I got for today. Catch you later.